The mountain man they called. Bear laid down his cards with hands rough as tree bark, and just like that, he'd won himself a wife. The other men around the poker table in the Red Pine Saloon laughed until their bellies hurt, slapping their knees at poor Clayton Marsh, who'd just gambled away his bride of 6 months like she was nothing more than a sack of grain. Clayton stood up, his face red with whiskey and shame, muttering that Bear had done him a favor taking that worthless woman off his hands. Bear didn't laugh. He'd seen the way Clayton treated the slight woman who sat in the corner of the saloon, her face turned toward the wall, shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear into the shadows. He'd watched Clayton backhand her earlier that evening for bringing his drink too slowly. Bear had come down from his cabin in the high country for supplies, not for cards, but when he saw what kind of man Clayton Marsh was, he'd taken a seat at that table with a purpose. Eleanor Marsh didn't look up when Bear approached her. She was small, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. Her dress was threadbare, patched at the elbows, and her hands trembled in her lap. When Bear spoke, his voice was gentler than anyone expected from a man who stood 6'5" and wore a beard down to his chest. "Ma'am, I know this ain't how anyone dreams their life would go, but you've got a choice now. You can stay here in town, and I'll give you money for a room until you figure things out. Or you can come up to my cabin until spring, earn your keep with cooking and mending, and then decide where you want to go. Either way, you're free of that man." Eleanor looked up then, her eyes gray as winter sky and just as cold with distrust. "And what would you want in return?" Bear pulled off his fur hat, holding it awkwardly. "Just honest work, ma'am. I got a cabin needs a woman's touch, and I'm tired of my own cooking. You'd have your own room, your own space. I give you my word as a Christian man, I mean you no harm." 3 days later, they made the climb up the mountain on Bear's 2 horses, Eleanor silent the entire journey. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by pines, smoke curling from the chimney where Bear had left a fire burning. It was simple but solid, built with care, and bigger than Eleanor expected. Bear showed her to a small room off the main living area, clean and spare, with a real bed and a quilt his mother had made before she passed. The first week, Eleanor barely spoke. She cooked the venison and potatoes Bear provided, mended his shirts, and kept the cabin clean, moving through the space like a ghost. Bear worked outside mostly, chopping wood, checking his trap lines, giving her room to breathe. He noticed she flinched when he moved too quickly, how she always positioned herself near a door, ready to run. Winter deepened, and the snow fell heavy. One night, a blizzard hit so fierce that Bear had to string a rope from the cabin to the barn so he wouldn't get lost feeding the animals. When he came back in, covered in snow and half frozen, he found Eleanor had made a stew that smelled like heaven and had hot coffee waiting. She'd also done something he hadn't expected. She'd taken out his mother's old books from the trunk in the corner and arranged them on the shelf he'd built years ago but never filled. "You can read?" Bear asked, warming his hands by the fire. Eleanor nodded. "My father was a schoolteacher before he died, left me his whole library." Her voice cracked. "Clayton burned every single book when we married. Said reading gave women ideas above their station." Something shifted in Bear's chest. "There's more books in that trunk. Help yourself to any of them." That night, for the first time, Eleanor smiled. It was small, fragile as first ice, but it was real. As winter turned toward spring, the cabin became something neither of them expected. A home. Eleanor's laughter started to return, soft at first, then growing stronger. She taught Bear to read beyond the simple words he'd known, and he taught her to track deer, to read weather in the sky, to trust again. They talked by the fire about everything and nothing, about her dreams of teaching children someday, about his love for these mountains, about lives they'd lost and lives they might still build. One morning in early March, Eleanor was reorganizing Bear's supplies when she found a leather pouch hidden behind the flour. Inside were gold coins, more than she'd ever seen. Her hands shook as she counted them. Enough to buy 10 cabins, enough to live in luxury in any city. Bear came in from checking the thaw on the creek and found her standing there, the coins spread across the table. "You've been living like this," she whispered, gesturing at the simple cabin, the patched clothes, the sparse meals. "But you're rich." Bear sat down heavily, his face unreadable. "My father found a gold vein on this mountain 30 years ago. When he died, he left it all to me. I could go anywhere, be anyone." He paused, looking at her with eyes full of something she was afraid to name. "But I learned young that money don't make a man happy. Peace does, purpose does. People do." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "You could have married any woman you wanted. Someone beautiful, educated, someone who needed saving." Bear stood up, crossing to her. "Eleanor, I didn't win you at that poker table by chance. I counted cards, played every hand perfect, because I saw who you were in that saloon. Not worthless, not broken, just trapped. I saw a woman who'd survived hell and still had kindness in her eyes. I saw someone worth knowing." The secret Eleanor had been carrying, the one that had made her feel like a fraud, spilled out then. "I can't have children. That's why Clayton called me worthless. That's why he drank, and why he hated me, and why he bet me away like garbage." Bear took her hands in his, those rough, gentle hands that had never once hurt her. "Then we're both free to choose what kind of life we want, aren't we?" No obligations except to each other and to being happy. Eleanor looked around the cabin, at the books on the shelves, at the man who'd given her back her life without asking for anything but her company. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you, not because I'm owned or owed, but because for the first time in my life, I'm free to choose, and this is what I want." Bear smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his whole face. "Then we'll build something here. Maybe a school for the mining families down in the valley. Maybe just a life. Either way, we build it together." Outside, spring was breaking through the snow, melting the ice, bringing new life to the mountain. Inside the cabin, two people who'd found each other in the strangest way possible sat by the fire, reading together, finally home.